What's up, dudes? I just wanted to do a quick video about the Netflix romantic comedy original Always Be My Maybe, starring Ellie Wong and Randall Park. Now, the basic premise of this movie is there are two friends who grew up together who hook up, they mess up, and then they split apart and they come back together as adults. Um, and the whole thing, they break apart because Randall Park's character loses his mother in the story rather abruptly, right as he's about to go off to college and do all these wonderful things, and he kind of gets stunted because of that. And Ellie Wong's character apparently was in love with him from the very beginning. So, in an attempt to make him feel better, move their relationship in another direction, they lose their virginity in the back of a 1980s Toyota Corolla. No joke. That's exactly what happens. So, this movie is about how they come together, and I like this movie. I found it really, really enjoyable. I love Randall Park and Ellie Wong together. I've been a fan of Randall Park's for longer than I was even aware that I was a fan of his, and I absolutely love him in Fresh Off the Boat. Some people say that this movie's plot is a little bit cliched, and they'd be right, but I would argue that there hasn't been a whole lot of innovation in romantic comedy since the late 90s. I mean, we think about all these classics like A Lot Like Love, About a Boy, Sleepless in Seattle, things like that, and we're like, oh yeah, these were great, but these were formula defining, and there hasn't really been a big shift. And the reason why I would argue that this shouldn't be a strike against the film is that if you deviate too much from what people expect, they're not gonna want to watch your movie. And so that's my opinion on that. Another criticism I've heard is that they come off like brother and sister. Well, yeah, in the story, they've been friends since they were really little kids, so why wouldn't they? And, I mean, if you've ever, made friends with somebody, been friends with them forever, and then tried to be boyfriend and girlfriend, it really is that awkward, dudes. So for me, while certain people thought that was a slight against the movie, I thought it actually added to the authenticity of the story. There are a couple things that I really, really liked in here, and then there were some things that I thought could have been done better. One of the things I really, really liked was that Randall Park's character is supposed to be in this band that literally hasn't changed since they were in high school, and he raps. He's an Asian nerdcore rapper, and his songs in the film are really, really catchy. And they actually get used in the end credits, which I thought was rather amazing. So there's definitely that. That's one thing I really liked. Another thing I really liked about the film was, like I said, their on-screen chemistry made the story even more believable than if they would have played it like they were hot for one another from the beginning, but they were just being friends because they had to be. I don't know, I'm getting kind of tired of seeing that, so I was happy to see this. And people have kind of criticized it for the hype being about the fact that it's an all Asian American cast or whatever. And yeah, dudes, it's gonna be that way until it becomes so ordinary that we don't need to talk about it anymore. That's just how it's gonna be. That being said, before I move on, dude, Keanu Reeves is in this movie and he plays this blown out version of a male Hollywood diva, and it's amazing. That in and of itself, I would say, is probably worth watching the movie for. It's pretty awesome. There were a couple things that I didn't really like about the movie, and they were fairly minor, depending on your definition of minor. Some people might see these things as being deal breakers. For me, they weren't. The editing was a little strange to me. So there's this scene in the movie where Daniel Day Kim plays Ali Wong's fiance and brand manager at the beginning of the film, and they're discussing possibly spending some time apart. And during that scene, you know how you usually have like a J cut or an L cut, like back and forth between the two people, depending on what you want to do with it. And it's usually just standard, one person's on this side, the other person's on that side, and the camera flips back and forth and they're talking. And it's usually close up. This movie threw in some medium shots, so it kind of showed some emotional distance between the characters, which I thought accented the story really well. There were also there was also some use of novel angles during that sequence, so I thought I was gonna see some really off the wall editing, some unexpected editing tricks, but it kind of settled into a standard romantic comedy visual style. So I was a little bit let down by that. The other thing you need to be aware of is that the third act feels kind of impacted. So most of the time, about 35 minutes left into a 90-minute film, or 40 minutes even, is Act 3. It gives it some breathing room, gives the characters some time to feel like they've matured, and then the dude or the woman goes and gets the love of their life, apologizes for all their misgivings, and happily ever after. This part of the movie really cemented at like 26 to 22 minutes remaining in the film. So it was really near the end, and I thought it was really, really condensed, and I thought it felt a little too undercooked. With that in mind, though, the filmmakers did seem to anticipate this, and they used both the opening credits and the closing credits in a pretty creative way to integrate it into the storytelling. The opening credits set up the characters for you. They kind of give you an idea of their relationship and their dynamic going into the film. And in the end credits, there's a progression of how their relationship evolves over time. And Randall Park's nerdcore rap is featured, which I thought was cool, but that being said, I would have liked to have seen a little more organic elasticity to that third act problem. That being said, though, the woman who directed this, whose name I can't recall off the top of my head at the moment, she is the producer behind Fresh Off the Boat. And to be honest, dude, like, the film is pretty strong for a Netflix romantic comedy. It's up there with All the Boys I've Loved Before. And if you like that movie, you're definitely going to like this. I'd consider it a fun night in, and I would recommend it if you're interested. Yeah, so with that, I'll see you at the movies.